Have you ever lost a friend? I did, twice. The first was in 2015, another in 2021. Their names are Judith Redondo and Chard Pascogi. Their death left a hole in my heart. And yes, I wept. And until now, I grieve for their loss. In the Gospel today, we read that Jesus receives a message that Lazarus is ill and his two sisters seek his help. Mary and Martha appeal to Jesus for help because of his love for Lazarus. Indeed, Jesus loved him deeply. Twice we read in the account that Jesus was deeply moved. And sandwiched between these two references is the simple verse that says, Jesus wept. Jesus was not indifferent about the sickness of Lazarus and the sorrow of Mary and Martha. John chapter 11 verse 3 tells us the message that Jesus received was, Lord, the one you love is sick. In verse 5 we read that Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. The word for love used here is agape. Jesus was fond of them and loved them dearly. It is safe to say Lazarus and his sisters were beloved friends. The gospel has so many talking points that can be reflected on, but allow me to just focus on these two words. Jesus wept. There are many points to reflect on with these two words. First, there is no shame in tears. Jesus was acquainted with grief. Knowing that Jesus, the Son of God, wept, dignifies the tears of those who wept and all who grieve in the Bible. We read the stories in the Bible. Abraham wept when he buried Sarah. David and Jonathan wept together. Hezekiah wept over his sickness. Josiah wept over the sin of his nation. So on and so forth. Jesus can identify with us whenever we are in tears, whenever we are in sorrow. Second, Jesus had humanity in his perfection, and this is humanity unadulterated. And an adulterated humanity is generous and sympathetic. What then perhaps moved Jesus to give way to tears? The context in the gospel provides us the answer. When Jesus met Lazarus' sister, Mary, and saw her and others weeping, he groaned in the spirit and became troubled. Jesus, seeing their pain, moved him to feel the hurt to the point that Scripture says, groaning in the spirit. That was why Jesus gave way to tears. It greatly saddened Jesus to see his beloved friends stricken with grief. Like us, Jesus shares in the grief of those who mourn. Yet, unlike any other, God the Son was able to do something about their suffering. Moreover, Jesus allowed the sympathetic passion for uniquely doing for Lazarus what he will one day do for all of us, righteous dead. Third, Jesus loves his friends. Mary and Martha are close followers of Jesus, and we read that in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. Though they do not travel with him, they live in Bethany, which is only about 3 kilometers from Jerusalem. This makes it extremely close to the religious leaders who are committed to having Jesus silenced. At this time, Jesus is in Bethabara, about 32 kilometers from the city. Jesus knew that it was dangerous for him to travel anywhere near Jerusalem during this time, since the religious authorities in Jerusalem planned to destroy him. Nevertheless, Jesus was willing to pay that high price just so that he could help his friend. For Jesus, coming to Jerusalem during the Passover was an act of courage. His weeping is a result of his love, the love that moves, a love so profound that it results in an act. He made Lazarus rise from the dead. In so doing, Jesus demonstrated that he is the resurrection and the life. Death was not the object or end result of Lazarus' sickness. Instead, Jesus intended to use Lazarus' death for the glory of God. Friends, brothers and sisters, in the Gospel of John, love is linked inextricably to death. John chapter 15, verse 13 says, "No one has greater love than this, to lay one's life for his friends." And in John chapter 3, verse 16, we are very familiar, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son." And that is also true in the story of today's Gospel. Martha, Mary, and Lazarus' relationship with Jesus does not mean that bad things will not happen. Jesus does not prevent Lazarus from dying, but he is ultimately present to them. And God is glorified even in something that feels initially unredeemably painful. Being in a relationship with Jesus means facing death and grief with him, and learning that despite the death and the dryness and the finality of the entrance door to the tomb of our hopes, he is our source of life. Nothing is ever so dead, so sorrowful, that can keep Jesus from loving us. Amen.